Excellent. Okay, Gareth, so again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's obviously, a big kind of, it's part of our mission, basically, to raise awareness of credit unions and ethical lenders in the UK. So I suppose a good place to start would be to ask, when you first became aware of credit unions and community banks, and have you got any ideas of what's changed since that point in the ethical lending sector?
So I first got involved in credit unions, or aware of credit unions, I suppose, when I was a sort of young counsellor in Harrow, and looking at the issue of sort of poverty. I mean, Harrow then was seen as very much a leafy, well-off borough, but there were clearly pockets of real poverty, and I was just really interested in how you tackle poverty, and what I as a counsellor could do about it, and that led me to the co-op movement, and in particular to credit unions. And I think credit unions are a great force for good. I'm struck by the power of credit unions, particularly in the United States and in places like Ireland and the Caribbean, and I'm pleased at the sort of the growth in the credit union movement in the UK. And I suppose that's one of the most encouraging things for me, over the period since I first got interested and aware about credit unions, is that they are becoming slowly more recognised in the UK, and they are seen as an ethical alternative. And in particular, the contrast between credit unions and payday lenders, and the exorbitant amounts of interest that payday lenders and others charged, I think has helped to highlight the benefits that credit unions can bring.
Absolutely. And you touched on something there, they're slowly becoming more recognised. I mean, for us and for kind of younger generations, that's pretty much the biggest obstacle that we find. So in your words, I mean, how would you describe a credit union to somebody who hasn't heard of one before?
So I'd say a credit union is an organisation that will help you improve your finances by everybody pooling their funds together. It'll provide you with easy access to very cheap loans when perhaps you're in a crisis situation and you really need it. And all the time your money's with the credit union, you're going to get an interest on it too. And you're going to know that even if you're not in need of help, others will be, and that your money, whilst it's making you interest, is also helping those people in crisis too.
Spot on. Okay.
I'm not sure if my internet connection is dropping out a little bit here. Sorry, guys. But I suppose we've spoke about what is sort of important about credit unions to an individual, but from a sort of wider perspective, why would you say that they're important, Gareth? Maybe looking at a kind of like national level.
Well, I think credit unions are important because they help people to manage debt. They help people who don't have much by way of savings to get access to finance very quickly when they need it. And we're in the middle of our cost of living crisis now, and people's budgets are really, really tight in many cases. So if something goes wrong, say you suddenly need to buy clothes for your children to go to high school, maybe, and you need to get a loan to do that, instead of going and having to pay exorbitant sums of money and having a fairly unappreciative computer chase you for that money, you can go to a credit union, get the loan, not have to pay huge rates of interest. You can talk to someone about how you pay that loan back, and it's just a much calmer, less stressful way of getting a bit of help.
Brilliant. And we've also seen, Gareth, you've discussed in the past the right to save.
Yeah.
How would you describe that for us?
Well, what I'd say is everybody should have the right, in my view, to go to their employer and to say, I want to save with a credit union, and I want you, my employer, to deduct a small amount or a large amount, if people really wanted to, from my earnings before you give the rest of my earnings to me, and I want you to send that to a credit union. So it's like a direct debit, but it's done by the employer into the credit union. It's your decision. You can stop it at any point, but your employer should help you to save if that's what you want to do. And that the good employers do that already. And we've seen from work that has been done with Leeds Credit Union, with employers in Leeds, that where people are given that right to save, not only do they save money with a credit union, it improves their sense of well-being, it increases the credit union's strength, and it helps to make a real difference to the lives of people who are often on relatively low incomes, or certainly not on huge incomes.
Absolutely. And I think even from the business perspective, the things associated with kind of financial exclusion and stress created by debt, if those things are taken care of, then workforces tend to be more productive, more happy, mental health tends to improve as well. Absolutely. So,
I just add, a right to save with a credit union is not going to lead to huge costs for business. Exactly. Most businesses will already have some sort of arrangement whereby people can give to charity through their pay packet, or can belong to a credit union and pay direct to the trade union. So what we're simply saying is just extend that to credit unions and allow people to save, with their local credit union.
Excellent. Yeah. So what would you say then, Gareth? Obviously, credit unions at the moment, that membership, it isn't as kind of widespread as we would like. So what would you say, what sets a credit union apart, maybe from, let's say, high street banks, for example?
Well, what sets a credit union apart is that there'll always be someone you can talk to about your finances. You won't have to pay big rates of interest. You get a competitive rate, and your money, instead of when it makes a surplus or a profit, it's not going to some overseas shareholder or some already very rich person. It's going to make a difference in your community. So I think the government should go out of its way to promote credit unions. It isn't doing so at the moment, but they are an obvious part, it seems to me, of the response to the cost of living crisis.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So yeah, you've touched on the cost of living crisis. So we just sort of wanted to hear from your words, what are the biggest sort of financial challenges that are faced in the UK at the moment?
Well, the biggest financial challenge, I think, for many people is energy prices, which have rocketed. I think for an average household, you're paying about just under £2,000 a year. That, if all the predictions are right, could rise as high as £3,000 by October, as energy bills potentially go up again. You add into that mix the impact of inflation on sort of food prices, and people's incomes people's finances are being squeezed very severely, and incomes are not rising to match, and therefore any way that you can reduce your costs, i.e., and this is where credit unions come in. If you can reduce the amount of interest you pay on, say, a loan, then why not join a credit union? It makes sense. It helps you to build up a small lump sum to protect you when if you have a crisis in your income, or where you need to spend some money quickly. And I use the example of having to buy school uniforms, or saving for Christmas. A credit union can make a small but considerable difference to the quality of life for people.
I think, we're sort of talking a lot about the cost of living crisis, and that's something that we're finding in our work. It's something we're talking about a lot. It's affecting our clients as much as the people that they serve. So what is your sort of vision for the economy in the next 12 months? How do you think things are going to sort of play out? Do you think we'll still be in a cost of living crisis, or do you think we'll sort of be through it? And I guess, what do you think it's going to take to get through it as well?
Well, I'd love to say that we will be through it very quickly. I fear that that's not going to be the case, because it doesn't look like the government's got a plan to help people through, in particular, the costs of their energy bills. And inflation certainly looks like being high for quite a while. And the worry is, the Bank of England and others have talked about potential recessions, certainly talked about inflation being around for a while. So, I sort of fear for the future for many people in my constituency. What I would like to see is a windfall tax and an immediate reduction in people's energy bills. That's something that other countries have been able to do. I think we're going to have to lift benefits for people, particularly universal credit. And it's worth remembering that many people who are in financial trouble are in work, as well as people who are, for all sorts of reasons, are not able to work. So those would be my top immediate things. But actually, you need a range of support, and this is where I think the government should be thinking slightly longer term, and thinking, well, how can we help people in the future manage their finances better, and reduce what they have to pay. And one of those ways, surely, is to invest a bit more time and energy into helping credit unions expand, because of the low rates of interest, because of the opportunity to build up a little sum of money that you can rely on if there's a crisis. So I hope there's going to be some changes to financial services legislation. There is some talk that there might be a few measures to help credit unions, and I'm certainly going to be pushing for those measures to be expanded.
Superb. And you've just talked about, Gareth, the range of support. Obviously, we know all about the fantastic work credit unions are doing at the moment. But say if families were facing financial difficulties at the moment, what support is out there for them? Where could they turn?
Well, if you're in a credit union now, certainly talk to your credit union for advice, because the credit union will know where the best agencies are with the best advisors to help you in terms of your personal circumstances. But citizens' advice is always a great starting point. There are often local law centres still going that can help people. There's a great organisation called Step Change, which helps people who are in debt to get to a place where they're managing their debt and out of trouble. So there are all sorts of places. But yeah, if you're a member of a credit union, start with a credit union, because they'll know what's out there. They'll have links, and they'll be keen to help you. Absolutely.
And in terms of the future, then, I mean, is there anything that you think credit unions could be doing more of in the future?
Well, I'd love credit unions to offer a whole range of financial services, to be more visible on high streets, to draw people in. I'd love them to work with employers to advertise credit unions. Some do already, and that's fantastic. And in a sense, we need to persuade the big organizations, like transport companies, etc., to work with local credit unions, to advertise credit unions, so that people can see more credit unions, can see more of their services, and the credit unions become more visible. But yeah, I mean, access to insurance, perhaps through a credit union, would be one thing. More access to mortgages. Some credit unions do that already. Providing more of the sort of quick loans. Most credit unions are now doing that sort of service. As credit unions can build their financial strength, so more of these services can be offered. And I'd love to see credit unions being as big in the UK as they are in the United States and Ireland and the Caribbean.
Brilliant. And so we talked about kind of what types of things we could do and what we'd love to see. So if Labour were to come into power, Gareth, I mean, how would they help credit unions and the ethical lending sector generally?
Well, what I haven't, if I'm honest with you, I haven't had that conversation directly with Rachel Reeves and the Shadow Treasury team. But I know they're sympathetic to credit unions and are keen to see how we can expand credit unions. I think we'd certainly want to make. I mean, one of the bugbears that credit unions, the people who run credit unions, have is with the regulators and some of the inflexible rules that the laws around credit unions have locked into the system. So, trying to make a more flexible system of rules to make it easier for credit unions to expand their services would be one thing. I'd hope to persuade the Shadow Treasury team, if we haven't persuaded this government, that we should commit to that right to save, to give that guaranteed right for people to be able to save with a credit union. And I'd just like to see huge amounts more marketing of credit unions, because they're one of the great secrets of British financial services, I think. And yet, they are such a huge force for good if people can only be put in touch with credit unions and become aware of them.
Absolutely, totally agree. I mean, that's the reason for us setting our business up, to be totally honest with you, is to raise awareness and the profile of credit unions through marketing and specifically kind of digital communications. On a wider kind of scale, Gareth, I mean, in terms of digital kind of communications, obviously we've noticed how active and supportive you are of the ethical lending sector. In your experience, kind of digital communication and social media in particular, how has that kind of fit into your kind of performance as an MP? Has it been positive, negative? What's your kind of take on it been?
Well, it's probably one of the biggest changes in communications, I suppose, over my time as an MP, that instead of spending huge amounts of energy producing leaflets to put through the doors of your constituents, you're now actually needing to communicate through Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and other forms of social media platforms that are opening up. And I think that's only going to increase. So, the great thing about an organization like yours is that you're offering the sorts of access to digital communications which the bigger financial services players take for granted. So, all power to your elbow in working with credit unions on those issues. I think that's my sense of the biggest thing as well, that credit unions continue to need, is that access to communicate, that access to explain who they are and what they are with more people.
Superb. Brilliant. Guys, I don't know if there's anything else. Are we okay? Superb.
Quite a lot.
I think that's
No
us.
worries. Thanks ever so much. I suppose the last thing I'd say to you is, the other thing I'd like to see is that every employer over a certain size should be required to offer that access to a credit union. The good ones already do it, but I can't understand why councils and housing associations and civil service departments don't all do that anyway. It should be a standard thing. So that's certainly one thing I'll keep pushing for. But thanks very much for your interest, and all power to your elbow.
Thank you so much, Gareth. Cheers. Thank
Lovely
you.
to meet you, Gareth.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
Later.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.
Cheers.